Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know that this video is brought to you in part by my awesome patrons over on Patreon, subscribers on Twitch, and channel members here on YouTube. For just a few bucks a month, you can get early access to video releases as well as having your name featured amongst the rest of these amazing people. This video's been in the works for over about a month now, and I wouldn't feel anywhere near as comfortable working on something like this without the support of you guys, the ones who've allowed me to work on things I'm actually passionate about. And if you don't want to commit to a monthly thing but still want to show your support, you can click on that super thanks button right below this video. Seriously, anything and everything is appreciated. And hey, you even get a cool little badge of honor to go with it. Thank you again to everyone who's been supporting me over the years. It really means the world to me. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy Sonic Forces Rewritten. I love Sonic Adventure 2. As a kid, its high-speed action, broken up by its unique treasure hunting stages and almost arcade-style mech sections where you had to string together combos in order to get an absurdly high score, were best compounded by its larger-than-life story, touching on themes of identity, genetic experimentation, and the abject horror with which governments can create secret operations that it can then keep from the public for years. Does it touch on any of these subjects well? No, not really, but it's a great gateway to introduce younger audiences to more mature themes, and much like Sonic Adventure 1 before it, tried to create a more complex narrative featuring these characters beyond just funny blue mascot fights funny egg-shaped bad guy. Sure, you had themes of nature versus technology in the older games, but at the heart of it all, the narrative of Sonic the Hedgehog had always been about one thing: play through the stages and beat the bad guy. I love Sonic Generations. In an era where Sonic Team had been experimenting with formulas for years with some ups but mostly downs, Generations presented us with a more refined version of the so-called boost formula, alongside a style featuring a more classic version of the character, a playstyle that hadn't been recreated very successfully since the Sonic Advance days, even amongst the unfortunately titled and borderline misnomer Sonic the Hedgehog 4. At its core, it's a celebration of the mainline Sonic titles from a level and gameplay standpoint, where the narrative takes a backseat to deliver some fun, high-speed action in familiar areas from the series' history. Eggman somehow manages to command a monster that controls time and space, and it's up to Sonic and Tails to stop him. It's not a deep or even really good story, but it's serviceable for the purposes of what is an otherwise fantastic game. I greatly dislike Forces. I want to hate it. No, you don't understand. I really want to say that I hate this game, but in trying to view this as fairly and objectively as possible, I have to acknowledge that in spite of its flaws, there are way worse games out there. 2006's Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, is a game that I think is objectively worse. In fact, strike that, it's a game that I know is objectively worse. From its constant glitchiness to its nonsensical, often irritating, downright unimportant plot, there's hardly anything redeemable about that game. Except that I subjectively think it's kind of fun. Not good, hell no, it is not a good game, but it's a game that's so bad that I kind of enjoy it. And see, what's ironic about it is that I think that at their core, both Forces and Sonic 06 suffer from the same main issue. They didn't quite understand what made the games that they were based on enjoyable to audiences. By this I mean that they were clearly based on earlier beloved games in the series, but the team didn't quite understand what made them so beloved. In the case of Sonic 06, it's clearly based on the adventure games, with the major difference being levels that are far too long, only made longer by the ridiculous amount and length of the loading screens, controls that felt clunky when compared to its predecessors, and a story that didn't even know how to resolve itself, culminating in a reset that rendered the events of the game null. Speaking of null, Sonic Forces! See what I did there? Because null and, null space, anyway. Sonic Forces felt like it was supposed to be a love letter to the fans that were requesting that the games revisit a grittier, somewhat more serious narrative like the adventure games it introduced. Except for the fact that the people running the show this time around couldn't for the life of them decide what they wanted to do. Sonic Forces felt like a literal fanfiction brought to life, and not in a good way. Enter Ken Pontac and Warren Graff. While the extent of their involvement with the series is still a bit lost on me, their tenure as writers for the Sonic series began with Sonic Colors, which, much like Generations, is a rather weak narrative which is excused by virtue of how fun the game is to play. While they're often cited as being the main writers for the Sonic series and blamed for the state of the poorly received characterizations, it's worth mentioning that not only were they not the sole writers, but in some cases their only job was localizing. Which, granted, didn't help their case in trying to establish well-liked versions of the characters, but they're often treated as the cause and not a symptom of fans' discontent with the writing. From the beginning, it's not a good sign when you actively decide to hire writers that have been infamously quoted as saying, "We've never played a Sonic game." That being said, the state of Sonic narratives can't solely be attributed to them. A similar writing style could be observed in Sonic Free writers before Pontac and Graff had been brought on board, led by Yasushi Otake, who also doesn't seem to have much experience writing for Sonic. The only other Sonic-related thing he wrote before Free Riders was for Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games for the DS. I digress. While this video is set to mostly talk about how I would repen the script of Sonic Forces, I would also like to touch on what doesn't work for it from a gameplay perspective, since in writing for games, gameplay often comes before a story is decided upon. And it's difficult to do that without first mentioning the bridge between generations and Forces, 2013 Sonic Lost World. I like Sonic Lost World. I don't love it, but I also don't dislike it the way I did when I first played the game. It felt very un-Sonic-like, getting rid of a gameplay style that was proven to work in favor of a more experimental parkour system. And while not a broken system by any means, it wasn't one that was able to hold much weight amid the myriad of changes that Lost World brought to the table. A run button, the return of a proper spin dash, far more linear level design, a far less detailed environment design, and all this is mirrored by the structure of its own story, which is... It's not bad, but it's also not great either. Like, one thing that can be shared across colors, generations, and Lost World is that if you take the cutscenes and therefore most of the story out of it, you really don't lose much. Like, yeah, Generations kind of makes less sense, but you're mostly enjoying the game more than the story in these three titles. Forces, on the other hand, was practically designed to have a story, with its basis being that it is set in a world where the main villain, Dr. Eggman, has finally been successful in taking over the world. Not only that, but a new villain seemed to be taking center stage, bringing back a lot of Sonic's enemies from the past, including some that, as far as we knew, didn't have beef with him anymore. Not only that, but apparently classic Sonic is here again? Even though it's only been 5 years and 1 game since we last saw him? Technically 0 games since we last saw him, since Sonic Mania had released just months prior to this game, and that was the biggest issue to me. They piggybacked so hard on the success of Generations that they felt the need to rope in the great game that is Mania to be linked with the mediocrity of Forces. And while most people were hyped up for these trailers, the inclusion of classic Sonic never sat right with me, because I knew that Lost World had only just performed decently, and I'd always had this nagging suspicion that they were abusing the popularity that Generations and the inclusion of a classic version of the character had brought them, not understanding that the character is immediately cheapened when treated like a gimmick instead of like a separate era, or the way he's retconned in this narrative as a version of the character from a separate dimension. And then there's Buddy, also known as the Avatar. From what I remember, upon the reveal that the third playable character would be a customizable hero, people were being a bit harsh, criticizing the many of us that grew up as kids making fan characters based on the Sonic franchise, and now that I look back, it seems that a lot of people may actually agree with me in that it was a fantastic decision to do this. Speaking for myself, I can't remember what my initial thoughts were. I know I made fun of it, but more of in like a Sinnoh the Edgehedge, original character, do not steal kind of way, and not because I thought it was a bad idea. And I still don't think it was. I think that the Avatar is emblematic of the reasons I cut Forces some slack. It proves that Sonic Team was aware to some extent what the fans wanted and respected the community that their franchise had brought forth. And, I mean, how many companies would allow you to make your own fan character to insert into an established universe as what I would argue is the main character? Okay, having established all the points that I felt were necessary to contextualize my rewrite, let's get into it. From the get-go, there are a few things that I think are necessary to change, or just flat out get rid of, and my biggest thing to remove from the story is Classic Sonic. Classic is literally no more than a gimmick in this game, since its inclusion meant being able to use the classic platforming gameplay style, leeching off of the successes of Generations and Mania. And to give Tails something to do, since he kinda would just blend in with the rest of the Resistance. Removing him from the story changes virtually nothing, except for the fact that now Tails has nothing to do, but we'll get back to that in a second. The second thing I would do right off the bat is to remove any external media to tell your prequel story. Why do you even have a prequel story? So, for those unaware, Sonic Forces had a series of prequel comics that give a bit more context to the events leading up to Forces' story, which I didn't find out about until after I'd played the game, and when I read them, I thought two things. One, these kind of suck because they're really short and hardly add anything to the story anyway, and two, why weren't these in the game to begin with? Video games aren't a medium like movies are. Like, yes, you do have a fixed budget, so you can't always do everything you'd like to do, but you don't really have a time limit on your storytelling either. So this is where I'd like to properly analyze the intricacies of what the story we have is and what I would change. The comics were published by Sega and penned by Ian Flynn, known for his work on the Idea and Design Works, or IDW comics, for his previous work on the Archie line of comics, and for being the best thing to happen to Sonic in the horrible year of 2006. And before I get into the comics, I'd like to mention that I won't be taking into account the IDW adaptation of Sonic Forces because it isn't canon to the story told in the game, while the prequel comics are. As well, I didn't want my rewrite to take any inspiration from them because I think it'd be fun to know how different that adaptation is only after the fact. In the first issue, Moment of Truth, it's shown that the Avatar's taken up a position to look out for the Eggman army in their hometown and receives the Wispin from Espio, who's there surveying the area with Team Chaotix. And while I like that the Chaotix were given something to do in this story, already we run into kind of an inconsistency. In the actual game, it's Knuckles who gives the Wispin to the Avatar. It's entirely possible that this isn't even the Avatar to begin with, and it's just another random member of the Resistance, but in that case, why the hell do we care about this guy? Either way, I feel like it should be Tails who's providing the Resistance with weapons, given that, well, you know, he's the one who makes and specializes in them. The most even mentioned about Tails here is that he's one of the heroes that the Avatar looks up to, which, as we see later in the actual game...
Sonic, help me!
Yeah. The next issue we have is Stress Test, and this one is probably my favorite because it shows Ian Flynn's care for the series, as well as the most missed potential in the entire game. The setting is Angel Island. The same Angel Island that we haven't seen or heard from since Sonic Adventure. Knuckles is guarding the Master Emerald, as he should be, when Silver shows up and warns Knuckles of an impending doom that ruins the future. Which is really sad that that's all that Silver does. Whenever something bad happens in his time, he comes back to Sonic's time to try and fix it. And I think maybe I'd change exactly that. Maybe Silver doesn't come back in time from the future anymore. In the main game, he's sort of there with no explanation unless you read these comics, and it makes sense given that he's there at Sonic's birthday party at the end of Generations. There isn't exactly a good reason for him to have stayed in Sonic's time, but it can be explained away by just... he did in order to protect the future, or something along those lines. He keeps coming back anyway, might as well keep him here. Anyway, he goes to Knuckles to warn him, and Knuckles tries to brush it off when suddenly he's met with the sight of the ancient Echidna tribe's village. Something that the games haven't talked about since, again, Sonic Adventure. And here's where I think that Silver could have a better justification for having gone to Knuckles in the first place. What if Silver was the first one to see one of the Phantom Ruby's visions? A vision of his ruined future. What exactly his vision is will be revealed later, so the only thing we need to know now is that Silver was shown something. As guardian of the Master Emerald, Knuckles probably knows something about this vision, so Silver goes to him. Back to the comic, Knuckles sees a vision of Chaos, but is unfazed since he knows it's just a vision, and that Chaos wasn't meant to be feared anyway. And then, Chaos attacks, with Knuckles and Silver fighting this Phantom Ruby version of Chaos Zero, and come on! Doesn't that sound super cool? Doesn't that sound like something that should be in the game? In any case, Knuckles and Silver kind of got their ass kicked, and that's when they realize that something needs to be done about this. While I think that these comics are really short, I think that this one in particular presents some really cool ideas that they could have taken advantage of in the actual game. Except, I would change another small detail about the ending. Why in the ever-loving hell would Knuckles just leave the Master Emerald there? Whatever this new thing is, which is threatening the world, should be such a concern that Knuckles would have to want to take the Master Emerald with him, foregoing Angel Island being in the sky. And again, this should be presented as a big deal, but again, we'll get to that later. The third issue, Looming Shadow, is by no means a bad comic, it's just one that, if you've played the game, doesn't really present us with any new information. E123 Omega, who we haven't seen in a Sonic game since Sonic Colors, on the DS, and 06 before then, has infiltrated Eggman's base, going on a rampage to defeat Eggman. Upon being informed of this by Orbot, Eggman sends the new villain Infinite to deal with him and to test his new abilities. Yep, this is Infinite's first canonical appearance, at the end of a comic with essentially already established abilities and an established relationship to Eggman. Rouge, who has been in communication with Omega this whole time, sends Shadow in to back him up. And while I don't love this comic for reasons that we'll get into with the next issue, I don't really think anything needs to be changed about it. That brings me to my next point. In this game, it isn't Sonic versus Eggman, it's the Resistance versus the Eggman Empire, and what sucks is we don't really get to see the Resistance do much. One of the things that makes me really want to hate this game is how much it says versus how much it shows. Speaking of which, I also think that we should see exactly how it is that Eggman comes into power. We know that it's through the use of the Phantom Ruby and Infinite's assistance after Sonic's defeated the city, which for the purposes of this video I'll be calling Sunset Heist from here on, but like, what about everyone else? What if the story got a little meta? What if it contained themes about how little Sonic's friends do nowadays compared to him and how they need to step up? Shadow never got captured or anything of the sort, so why isn't he doing anything? Why are Blaze and Cream not present with the Resistance? That's the magnificent part of all this. Eggman has taken over 99% of the world. Not South Island, not a part of the world, 1% shy of the entire world. And it makes sense that this small town would be all that's left, but what does the rest of the world look like? I realize that this is a lot to ask for from a developing standpoint, but if you're going to use Sonic's friends, you might as well use Sonic's friends, right? It is, after all, Sonic Forces. This isn't just about Sonic anymore. The most we get to see is Silver getting his ass kicked by Infinite, Shadow kicking a total of 1 Phantom copy Shadow, and then the battle at the end of the game, which isn't as cool as they probably thought it was. What I'm saying is, the rest of the Sonic cast should have been as playable as Sonic was. The boost formula had been in place for nearly a decade at this point, and Sonic's friends hadn't been incorporated in any capacity. You had classic Sonic in the Avatar, so it's not like you were above using other characters, but I'll get to that in a bit. How cool would it be to see Knuckles and Silver fight alongside each other for the first time ever, really? Not to mention that you kinda had a buddy system going on as well with Modern Sonic and the Avatar, and you could have done something similar with the Sonic characters. Have each of them team up with each other a la Sonic Advance 3 to create new team mechanics. Of course, we need to think about what their role in the overall script is, and given that Eggman has taken over the entire world, I think that they could be spread out to really give the audience a sense of how much of the world Eggman has taken over, in a way similar to how Sonic Unleashed did it. And here is where we incorporate a sort of Sonic Heroes, Sonic 06 kind of design, where we have our characters split up into groups of 3. Shadow and Team Dark could handle a certain part of the world, Blaze, Cream, and Silver could form a new team covering another part of the world, the Chaotix another, while Knuckles, Tails, and the Avatar cover the base, trying to save Sonic from captivity. That leaves Amy with a very important task, which I think would actually be pretty interesting. In the actual game, she serves as the communications specialist and seems to be well versed enough with the resistance technology in order to give the team readings, sightings, and the like. And while she fills that role pretty perfectly, I think it'd be pretty amazing to have Amy be the commander as opposed to Knuckles. And see, the thing about that is that Knuckles being the commander makes sense, given the fact that he's a descendant of a tribe known for commanding groups. So naturally Knuckles would be a leader, but it also doesn't feel right to not have him be a part of the action alongside his friends, only doing so until the very end. Amy is also very neutral when it comes to her relationships with these characters. While I get it, it's war with a common enemy, everyone seemed to get along a little too well, despite Knuckles being the commander, particularly a note Rouge. Not that I necessarily think that Rouge and Amy would get along great or anything, but it makes more sense that they'd at least be neutral toward each other. I think that the idea of them losing Sonic is what makes Amy step up as the leader is just a very funny and very Amy thing to do. I feel like the more thought I put into this, the more it bothers me that Sonic's friends weren't more involved story-wise, especially when half of, if not most of the conversations happen through dialogue on the level select screen as opposed to in a proper cutscene. Which makes sense because of just how much dialogue there is, but you really get a sense of that when the backdrop of these conversations is the same every time. Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. There's just so much about this game that feels like a missed opportunity. My point is, defeating Eggman and Infinite should be a group effort, not 2 Sonics and a rookie effort. The Resistance treat every mission like it's pivotal, and I get that, but it doesn't really feel like it's that big a deal when, at their core, pretty much all their operations are being handled by the same 3 characters. Sometimes for bigger plans to be carried out, you also need smaller missions taken care of. Adventure 2 kind of does an interesting job with a concept like this, especially in the hero side story where, in order to be able to get to the Ark, Tails needs to clear the path so the team can find the entrance to the hidden base, Sonic needs to rush through Pyramid Cave in order to find where Eggman's rocket is, and Knuckles needs to find 3 keys in Death Chamber in order to access the rocket itself. If any one of them failed in their mission, it'd be a pretty big deal. They'd miss their chance to board the rocket and get to the Ark, but what they're doing seems so simple that it also doesn't really feel like what they're doing is too pivotal to the overall goal. And it isn't until you see the result of all those achievements put together that it feels like something important was done. But if every single mission is important, none of them are. I actually love the implication that Sonic has been tortured during the time he's been imprisoned. But I do recognize that having your main character be tortured in a game marketed towards children probably wouldn't go over too well, especially depending on how it's presented. However, it's also important to do when you explicitly say that he's been tortured, even more so when you've already shown this character in peril before. Like, look at this shot from the intro to Shadow the Hedgehog. Sonic looks dirty, defeated, like he just got a major beating. And even in some of the endings to Shadow, Sonic looks at the very least defeated. Here, Sonic feels like he's been on vacation. And that's one of the major complaints of the game that I see many people, myself included, having. The Eggman Empire is seen as a threat and is described as dangerous, but we never really see that. One of the prime examples they could have utilized to showcase that is the level selection in the game. I oftentimes hear people complain about Sonic Team reusing old zones in this game, such as Green Hill and Chemical Plant, and at first I completely agreed. There's zones we've seen 1,000 times, but think of the storytelling potential there is with having these classic areas be part of the actual story. This is the place where these characters are from. It's only natural that seeing their home being destroyed would invoke ire. But there are a few other zones that I would include here for the sake of the story, which we'll get into as I get into the complete rewrite. Another issue with how the taking back the world thing is presented is that you retake territory with every few levels you complete, but like, why? Not only does it seem arbitrary, that's just us getting from point A to point B. We're not really doing anything to drive the Eggman army out of those locations. Remember that thing I said about how this game tells more than it shows? Well, half of the things that we in the Resistance do is only talked about. We never see the characters do anything of substance other than fight and lose at fighting. That's why strategically placing bosses in different parts of the world would make it feel like something important is actually happening rather than us just getting from level to level. Speaking of levels, while I like the stages that we have, I feel like they're given very strange treatment in this game, where the areas have a collective name, but each individual level has its own. For example, while we have Green Hill Zone, that area is divided into 5 separate levels. Modern Sonic's Lost Valley, the Tag Team Arsenal Pyramid, Classic Sonic's Green Hill, the Avatar's Guardian Rock, and Shadow's Virtual Reality. The problem with that is that at the end of the day, and with the exception of Arsenal Pyramid, they all look like Green Hill, and it makes it difficult to remember specific levels and their names, particularly because they end up kind of just blending together. And as I found out, that's not just a personal issue. Even speedrunners, people who know the game inside and out, have a hard time remembering level names because they look so familiar, and they're all over the place.
I'm forgetting all the stages. Death Egg is next, I think.
Network Terminal.
That's right. And then Death Egg is after that.
Back to my Green Hill example, Lost Valley is Act 1, Arsenal Pyramid is Act 7, Green Hill is Act 10, Guardian Rock is Act 20, and Virtual Reality is Act 3 in Episode Shadow. We have no business returning to Green Hill so many times over the course of this story. In all honesty, it would be way more digestible if we went through these levels all at once, or if they were visually distinct enough to feel like separate stages, but the game ends up taking us back and forth so much that you kind of forget how many times you actually visit an area. Revisiting the game, I was shocked to learn that the game has a total of 7 different areas, which is pretty average for a Sonic game. But this game has the opposite problem that Sonic 06 does, where in that game the levels could get annoyingly long, in this game they're frustratingly short. And I couldn't explain why I feel that way. A lot of Sonic games have levels that average 1 to 2 minutes in length, but I guess they just feel like they should be longer in this one, especially given just how fast we travel through them, as well as the incredibly linear structure of the level design. In order to solidify the areas that we have in this game, let's condense them into their regions on the world map, those being Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Mystic Jungle, City, which again we'll call Sunset Heights, Metropolis, and Death Egg. I left out Eggman Empire Fortress because I feel like Death Egg could fill its place, and I feel like Arsenal Pyramid should be its own location as well, since it feels so disconnected from Green Hill. Given how many areas we revisit from older games, I feel like we can have this be a celebration of the modern era in the same way that Mania was a celebration of the classic era, where we revisit areas and concepts that were born in the adventure games onward. That way we establish a link between those older games and Forces in a way that's more organic than the way Generations did it. In that game, you could justify the random assortment of levels as being strung together by the nothingness of space-time, but seeing as this is a worldwide assault, it makes sense that they would try to retake different areas of the world at the same time. This would allow us to play as the multiple characters who, in classic Sonic fashion, are only slightly different in terms of their abilities, making it easy to adjust to their playstyles. In doing so, we could assign these different locations to better fit older areas, and have them feel more like places across the world rather than in a singular location. Even better, what if these zones had 3 separate acts like in the classic days, where the last act was also a boss level? That way we preserve the concept of zones and levels being separate, but still in the same spirit, while preserving what makes them stand out amongst each other without feeling like we're constantly revisiting the same level. You'll see what I mean. Wow, sorry, that was a massive detour from the comics, but I promise that it was an important one. Let's finish up the comics with the 4th and final issue, Rise of Infinite, which is the one that really pisses me off because it's a prequel to the prequel of the prequel. By this I mean that it's a prequel story to The Looming Shadow, which itself is a prequel to Episode Shadow from the game, which itself is a prequel to the events of Sonic Forces. And it's not even interesting. Eggman finds the Phantom Ruby, Infinite attacks Eggman because he plans to steal his tech and sell it alongside his Jackal Squad, and okay, admittedly that is an interesting origin story, but it's too short-lived to really be impactful. Even if it was put in the games, the exchange would be the equivalent of, "I'm going to kill you, fat man. Why don't you join me instead?" Yeah, right, I was pretty bored. Like, at the very least, you could have established that Infinite was bored before you gave him the storyline. Even Squad Jackal was like, dude, are you sure you want to do this? In Episode Shadow, it's shown that Infinite really cared about his squad mates, and I'm wondering if there was something there. Especially since the theme of this game is war, it would make sense to have your comrades be at least a somewhat pivotal part of the story. In doing so, we could have even gotten more new characters, too. There are a few other Jackals aside from Infinite that are given unique designs, and 3D artist Nabrak Rock made some renders of them, giving them the names Uno, Deux, Trois, and Quatre. And the artist of the comics, Adam Bryce Thomas, gave his full blessings to these names, claiming that they were, and I quote, way more cool than what I had. And honestly, I like them too, especially when Shun Nakamura, the game's producer, revealed that in the original drafts of the script, Infinite's name prior to his fusion with the Phantom Ruby was Zero, which I think is not just really cool, but also could have been a good part of his character. The reflection of his inner turmoil, denoted by his name, his worth. Anyway, off track again. What if Defense Squad Jackal was what Infinite wanted to keep protected? They're his family, his friends, and if he helps Eggman, he just wants protection for them. And that's why they're taking on this bounty for his technology, in order to survive. That would also be a wonderful opportunity for Eggman to show how dangerous he really is when not up against Sonic and his friends. Jackal's squad are no heroes, and so they go in unprepared for the might of the evil Dr. Eggman and the unprecedented power of his newly discovered Phantom Ruby. Which, let's talk about, because the Phantom Ruby's power is so inconsistent and is explained so poorly in this game that I think it needs to be better defined in order to make sense with the rest of the script. In Forces, the Phantom Ruby is given a description that's very difficult to follow since it apparently doesn't actually do anything, at least not in real physical space. It's stated that its powers are based off of virtual reality, which is honestly a really cool idea, feeding the brain false information that it then interprets as something entirely different visually. The problem stems from how that translates into real space, because while this is the explanation that we're given, it doesn't explain how its illusions have actual mass and can hurt people. Shadow mentions that the phantom copies that Infinite creates have mass and form, but no heart or soul, and that's another cool idea, but the one character that conflicts with this is Zavok, who is pretty indistinguishable from the real deal, being the only phantom copy that's able to speak and recall previous encounters with Sonic, evident by his use of the word again when asking him how he could lose to Sonic. If not for the fact that he fades at the end of his boss fight, I would think that that's just the original Zavok. In Mania, the Phantom Ruby downright just alters entire beings and their abilities, which is a much simpler explanation without really having to sacrifice anything substantial about what the gem is capable of. And I think that at its core, having a combination of all these concepts is one that works best, one where the Phantom Ruby is able to enhance machinery, create visual hallucinations, and create tangible replicas that are controlled by whoever makes them. That way, you can preserve all its abilities while making them all consistent and make sense. Now that we've established exactly how the Phantom Ruby would work in this rewrite, let's get into the actual story combined within the game, and you might notice that I haven't really mentioned Sonic at all yet, and that's not just me. The comics don't feature Sonic at all, and neither does episode Shadow, which is where the game narrative begins, right after the events of Looming Shadow. But there is one strange thing. The end of Looming Shadow shows that Shadow is right outside of Arsenal Pyramid, about to go in and save Omega, and this is where episode Shadow should have started. For some bizarre reason, the story likes to keep going back and forth in time with multiple time skips in between, one of them being between the time that Looming Shadow and Episode Shadow take place. Apparently what happened was that Shadow went in there, killed Jackal's squad, and saved Omega, and then a month later the story kind of repeats itself with Omega going in by himself and then Shadow going in after him. This time, however, it's due to the new weapon that Eggman is creating, this new weapon being Infinite, who is also really tough to rethink of as a character. For starters, let me say that his dialogue is written like he's an anime villain, and I love it. While I ultimately think that the bad outweighs the good, even for Infinite, I think he might have been my favorite thing about the game, even from the beginning. He's like if Shadow never had a sense of morality in the end. And he has his own theme song. Remember when these characters would get their own theme songs? Infinite was so close to being exactly what we wanted, and he kinda just comes off as a pushover. And I think that there's a number of reasons for that. For one, it's disappointing how easily we defeat him during his first boss fight, considering that Sonic got absolutely smacked during their first encounter. This Infinite and this Infinite are not the same character. Secondly, his motivation is also weak. He agrees to help Eggman because he's bored, he wants to take on Shadow because he killed his friends, and takes on the mantle of Infinite because Shadow whooped his ass. Which again, has nothing to do with Sonic or even the Avatar. He only ever messes with Shadow like once after that. And what sucks about that is that his theme song basically sets up a way more interesting backstory than the one they end up giving him, to the point that when it was released, people theorized that Infinite could be an enemy that Sonic had already faced before. Cause I've been up against better, just take a look at my face. Cause I was born in this pain, it only hurts if you let it. So I'll take what's mine and start this war. Only scars remain of who I was. You live a lie, and that's the difference in you and me. This pain persists, I can't resist, but that's what it takes to be. From that, we can gather a lot more on what could have been a way more interesting character. What struck me as odd before I read the comics was that Infinite's face is never revealed to the audience, even in episode Shadow. I find it odd because they kind of make the whole he's wearing a mask thing seem more important than it actually is, especially considering that only one of his eyes is visible through the mask, which feels related to his heterochromia, but I don't really know how it's related. What if his fight with Shadow left him not only emotionally scarred, but physically? What if the only way that Infinite could survive his wounds was through allowing Eggman to make reparations to it? And in the process, Eggman inserts to him the finalized version of the Phantom Ruby he developed. I think I have a decent idea of what it was I wanted from this story, and before getting into it, I do want to warn you, the ideas that I have for what Forces could have been barely resemble what the actual game is at all. With that in mind, I think our very generous rewrite of Sonic Forces could go a little something like this. We start out in the avatar creation screen. We make our avatar and proceed to the game, where Sonic the Hedgehog races through the familiar Green Hill Zone, and upon reaching the city limits of Sunset Heights, he runs into a classic Eggman robot terrorizing Green Hill yet again. Except this time, there seems to be a group of people running away, and one that gets left behind is our avatar, trembling in fear at the sight of Dr. Eggman's latest machine. Sonic arrives and we fight Eggman, a simple stage and a simple boss to go with it. After Eggman's defeat, Sonic approaches the Avatar, who still hasn't run away, something Sonic recognizes. Sonic commends them on their bravery, calling them buddy for the very first time. Eggman returns to his lab in Metropolis, where Orbot and Cubot meet him and give him a hard time upon another defeat at the hands of his nemesis. Lamenting, Eggman begins designs on a new robot when Orbot announces that their sensors have picked up a sudden surge of power nearby, and the Doctor goes to investigate. Almost immediately, he's met with the shine of a strange striped gemstone, which he picks up. As he does so, the environment around him begins to change, showing to him a vision of Eggman Land, the place he so longs to create. In shock, he drops the jewel and the theme park disappears, piquing the Doctor's interest and wanting to study it more to learn the extent of its powers and how it works. As he ponders, an alarm sounds, indicating that his laboratory has been breached and is under attack. It's a group of jackals tearing through Eggman's machines at top speed. At their helm is a jackal with a red sword, one that Eggman overhears the other jackals call Captain Zero. From him, we learn that their name is Jackal Squad, and their mission is to raid the base to steal Eggman technology to sell to the highest bidder. As Zero hones in on Eggman to take him down, the Doctor lifts his newfound gemstone to reveal the Jackal's innermost desires. Around everyone, we see a scene of disaster, a broken city resembling Sunset Heights, and at its center, a monument to Captain Zero, the ultimate mercenary. Confused, his squadmates get captured by Eggman's robots as Eggman pushes Zero off of him. Members of Jackal Squad ask their captain what that vision just was. Eggman answers for him, stating that he took a peek into their boss's mind to see what it was he wanted most. As they try to shout back that their boss would never think of such a horrible, selfish reality, Zero stays silent, confirming the Doctor's words. Eggman approaches Zero, telling him how interesting he thinks this world he's imagined is. And if he would like to make it a reality, all he and his squad would need to do is to keep Eggman protected. Jackal Squad object, but Eggman insists, telling them that they don't have much of a choice. It's either join him or perish at the hands of the army of robots that have him captured. At the thought of this, Infinite pushes back, pleading with Eggman to let them go, and that they'll comply. Boasting, Eggman is glad to release them, but warns them not to go rogue, or their fate would have been the same either way. And see, that seems like a lengthy intro, right? But in all honesty, I didn't change much from the original Rise of Infinite comic. I just added a few things here and there to add tension, which is something the original script lacks so much of. Another one of my major gripes with Forces is that it feels like it just wants to be over with. Like, yeah, Sonic is fast, but everything in the game just feels like it needs to do things quickly, and I don't get why. From dialogue and the cutscenes to segments in the game that cause levels to lose their memorability, Sonic Forces could really benefit from taking its damn time. As we're met with the game's title screen, we get a big reveal for this game. We have multiple playable characters again, not just Sonic, and we do this by way of having Shadow race through what else but a city, Sunset Heights, when Rouge informs him that Eggman's forces have advanced within the Mystic Jungle. Omega has gone on ahead to do reconnaissance. They have banter similar to that seen in the actual game, except this time Omega is present to communicate with Shadow as well. Halfway through the level, two jackals try to stop Shadow's progress into the city, and they're taken down, asking their boss to forgive them. As we complete the level, we move on to Mystic Jungle, and instead, this is where we find out that Omega goes in shooting the whole place, where Rouge interjects angrily, telling Shadow to quickly get to Omega's position and provide assistance, particularly when Omega starts sounding like he's being taken down. As he rushes through the jungle, he's met with two more jackals that keep up with him, trying to take him out. Instead, Shadow takes them out, defeating them as he races through to Eggman's secret lab. The purpose of facing Jackal Squad during these levels is that way, we as the audience actually get to see what happens, and the weight of Shadow's actions are that much greater. He doesn't actually kill them, but they flee after their defeat, claiming that this whole Eggman business isn't worth the hassle their captain put them through. They abandon him. At the end of it all, we get to fight Infinite, the first encounter with this new foe. We get to see what it was that made Omega be broken down in the first place. A defeat at the hands of Zero and his sword. Without even asking for a name, Shadow grows angry with the one that tore down his friend. Zero goes down easily and Shadow taunts him, calling him worthless. I started writing the script before I had a chance to play the game again, and I thought it was really interesting how my idea for Infinite's identity being tied to his worth actually coincided with what was already in the game. In the actual scene, Shadow never calls Infinite weak. He calls him worthless, which I think cuts way deeper. And how I think Zero should find out that his squad was defeated is through this interaction. Zero could call for his squad mates when Shadow reveals that they've all left him. They didn't want to stick around, and no one was there to back him up. Beating him down emotionally after his physical beatdown, he chaos controls out of there with Omega in tow. Zero, trembling in fear, starts thinking about his squad, and about his own worth as a mercenary, as the sight of the plate under his phantom hallucination flashes in his mind. He's not worthless. He'll show the world his worth. This is when we get that opening cutscene, with Eggman declaring that his rage for Sonic has grown so much to the point that he's finally ready to reveal this new creation, dubbed Infinite. Honestly, I've always liked that opening scene because Eggman is actually intimidating again, which is even made evident by the fact that Orbot and Cubot, who are normally comic relief, poking fun at Eggman, seem frightened with how serious Eggman is this time around, which itself is a great instance of show, don't tell. A scene I see people complain about frequently is a scene where Tails cowers in fear at the sight of chaos, and understandable, that is arguably the worst scene in the game, but one of the reasons I dislike it so much is one that I don't see many people talking about, which is the fact that Tails, for whatever stupid reason, can't seem to fix Omega, which makes absolutely no sense. There's nothing wrong with showing Tails having this sort of prowess, and I think that's how the next scene should start, with him successfully repairing Omega at his workshop. After asking him how this all happened, Omega explains that that data is unavailable to him. He has no recollection of how he lost that fight. His sensors were disrupted shortly before being taken offline. It's then that Tails receives a radio transmission from Amy to inform him that it seems like Angel Island is falling again, which shocks him. Here we have the next returning level. In the area of Angel Island Zone, we have Sky Sanctuary, because of course they would. But here's the twist. You're playing as Silver of all characters, who says he needs to find Knuckles quickly for the sake of the future. At the Master Emerald altar, Silver is relieved to find Knuckles there. Knuckles is surprised to see Silver and wonders what brings him to Angel Island. Silver explains that a short while ago, something very strange happened out of nowhere. Reality seemed to distort, and a vision of Eggman with the Master Emerald appeared to him. Taking it as a sign, he thought to warn the Guardian of the Master Emerald right away. Assuring him that the Emerald was perfectly safe, Knuckles turns to see the ancient Echidna village, which shocks the both of them. Knuckles asks Silver if they've time traveled into the past, to which Silver replies, just as confused as Knuckles is, that he has no idea what it is that they're seeing, which Knuckles then proceeds to describe. From behind them, on top of the Master Emerald, emerges a familiar figure, one that Silver's never encountered before. Knuckles, now a bit more calm, explains that that's Chaos, Guardian of the Chow. Chaos then proceeds to attack them, initiating a boss fight where you're introduced to the game's new tag team mechanic, where you can play as two different characters, switching between them to take advantage of their unique abilities, while their base gameplay mechanics remain largely the same across characters. As Knuckles and Silver defeat Chaos, Chaos disappears in a strange blocky red aura, as does Pachacamax Village. This makes Knuckles take this far more seriously. He knows that the only option right now is to take the Emerald from the island to a place where it's safe from Eggman. As the both of them glide off of Angel Island, the island falls, revealing Eggman with the Phantom Ruby in hand, announcing that the Ruby's first test run was a success, and now the plan can be set into motion. In a variation of Sunset Heights, possibly Park Avenue since they're already so similar, Sonic receives the same transmission from Amy that Tails got, that Angel Island had fallen, and this comes as shocking news to Sonic as well. He announces that he's on his way to the Mystic Ruins to survey the area since Knuckles isn't responding. At the end of his level, this is where we're met with a phantom copy of Shadow, who Sonic of course thinks is the real deal. The phantom copy speaks to Sonic, but in a very strange way, one that doesn't exactly sound like Shadow's words. The phantom copy attacks Sonic, who is taken aback by the sudden hostility. As he fights this phantom copy, he hears another familiar voice coming from behind him. Zavok, whom he last saw on the Lost Hex. Joining the fight is also his oldest nemesis of the bunch, Metal Sonic, followed by Chaos. Sonic doesn't stand a chance against so many enemies at once and ends up losing the fight, with the last thing he sees being a floating masked entity descending upon him, claiming that it's a shame. He was promised Sonic would be more of a threat. And the thing is, this scenario makes more sense to me, one where Sonic is defeated because he's on his own, as opposed to having friends around him that don't do anything. Knuckles and Silver arrive at Tails' workshop, the only place that they could think of that would be safe. They catch Tails asking Amy if she's had any luck getting in touch with Sonic, and it seems like neither of them have. Knuckles seems confused that they wouldn't be able to, and this is where Tails gets worried. Knuckles and Sonic's paths would have crossed if everything had gone smoothly on Sonic's end, but now he's not so sure. Omega confesses that his communications with Rouge and Shadow also seem to not be working, with him getting ready to head out and Tails telling him that he's in no position to just leave like this. That's when Omega receives a transmission request from an unknown source. Tails hooks him up to the main monitor, which then shows a feed that reveals itself to be Eggman, who proceeds to explain how Sonic has not only been defeated, but captured at the epicenter of the ambush, gloating about how all Sonic's friends get to witness the rise of the Eggman Empire, with dozens of Death Egg robots being seen on screen, tearing the city up as our heroes look on in horror. And here's where we get a time skip, 6 months, just like in the actual game. We see a new hideout, one resembling Tails' old workshop, but run down. Barely put together, but still functional. At the center of the room, the Master Emerald, the symbol of what they're fighting for. Running the machines are Team Chaotix, Vector, Espio, and Charmy. Instead of Vector coming in, we see Knuckles complaining about how crazy things are out there, even after all this time. He asks where the commander is. Espio replies that she's still trying to contact Tails, with no luck. This is what will clue us into the fact that Tails has been missing, and something is up with him. That's when Amy comes in, excited to see that Knuckles has returned. Not just glad to see an old friend, she's grateful that he's still alive. As an aside, Knuckles says the same thing to everyone in the actual game, but most of what the characters say comes off as so disingenuous because a lot of their dialogue is performed so casually. He doesn't seem relieved that his friends are still with him, barely upset that Sonic is gone. And that's not just the fault of the breezy performance, it's also the thing I said about the pacing, feeling like they need to move on to the next line, meaning that there's never a moment of dramatic pause in the dialogue. Amy asks the present group if they've had any luck, to which Vector responds that they've had none. Seeking out the Chaos Emeralds would be so much easier if they could just be out in the field looking for them instead. Knuckles responds by saying that being in the field isn't much easier, given how far Eggman's army is spread. Charmy chimes in by saying that with an empire as big as Eggman's, it's hard to get anything done. The team gets an incoming transmission. It's Blaze the Cat, returning since her last appearance in Sonic Generations, now actually part of the story again. Behind her is Amy's old friend, Cream the Rabbit, and her Chow Cheese. Glad to see each other again, Blaze regrets to inform that the use of Chow seems to have put them nowhere closer to finding the emeralds, to which Cream apologizes. Amy tells her not to worry, but to get back to base safely. That's when Silver floats in, clearly in a weakened state. Everyone worries as Silver tells him that he'll be alright, but that they're in desperate need of new recruits since they're all either getting captured or annihilated. Amy informs the group that fortunately they do have a new recruit, coming all the way from Green Hill Zone to join them. As she does so, we change to a view of the Avatar running towards the hideout. We play a level called Secret Hideout with the objective of just getting to the hideout while dealing with Eggman's forces. This teaches us about the Avatar's grappling hook as well as our first insight into a world where Eggman has taken over. What would make this level particularly stand out is that this is the one level where there's absolutely no communication from anyone and no dialogue since the Avatar is mute. Before reaching the end of the level, a classic Eggman robot is about to attack the Avatar, and having no way to actively defend themselves, Tails drops in and assists, throwing a strange weapon to the Avatar. With it in hand, the two finish the stage together, reaching the Resistance's hideout. The Avatar steps in first and is greeted by the group, welcomed by everyone there, jokes ensue. But then Tails steps in, and everyone is stunned. Amy and Knuckles are thrilled that Tails is still alive. Amy then angrily asks why he hasn't been in communication with them over the last 6 months. Tails apologizes and claims that after what happened to Sonic, he didn't know what to do. He didn't feel like he could step up. Knuckles comforts him, telling him that they all processed what happened to Sonic differently. Amy took charge as the commander, and Tails hid away. Vector is a little less enthused, complaining that they really could have used his help during this whole ordeal. Again, Tails apologizes, but he does say that his time away was well spent. He managed to gather enough materials to create a new weapon that can harness Wisp's hyper-go-on energy, the same way that Sonic was able to, and use it as they pleased. He calls it the Wispin. Everyone sings the praises of Tails' new invention, considering that even without the power of the Chaos Emeralds, hyper-go-on energy could give them the edge that they need. When asked where this new weapon is, Tails points to the new recruit, much to the team's confusion. Amy trusts Tails' judgment, and if he trusts the rookie with the weapon, so does she. Another transmission, this time from Rouge. No luck on finding an emerald on her end. Banter with Knuckles ensues, but she does have interesting information regarding a weak spot in Eggman's line of defense. As she describes her experience, we see the flashback she's describing, and a new level begins with Eggman's Mystic Jungle base. There, at the end of the stage, we see that Rouge infiltrates his base and discovers files on the location of the Chaos Emeralds, which already seem to be in Eggman's possession. Tails wonders why, if that's the case, Eggman wouldn't use them. Silver offers the answer that there's no use for them if he already has the world. Rouge is sending the files to the Resistance, alongside another file. When questioned about this other file, Rouge explains that she found information on something called the Phantom Ruby. Before she's able to explain, her communications start breaking up. We cut to show her still inside of Eggman's Mystic Jungle base, where she is then confronted by Infinite, who tells her that she's revealed enough. Through the use of the Phantom Ruby, Infinite alters his voice to mimic that of Rouge, to tell Omega that an Eggman robot has been spotted, and Omega comes in, locking onto the real Rouge, his sensors tricking him into believing Rouge is his enemy. As she dodges each shot, she eventually gets hit by one, which is when Shadow springs into action, trying to get through to Omega. Clearly it doesn't work though, and a fight with Omega begins, with Rouge as your tag team partner. In a second phase, Infinite enhances Omega with the Ruby, but Shadow and Rouge still manage to bring Omega back to his senses. Now, focusing their attention back to Infinite, Shadow acknowledges him as the one that defeated Sonic. Infinite retaliates by saying that soon, he'll also be the one to defeat Shadow. The ultimate life form, fallen at the hands of the ultimate mercenary. That's when Shadow remembers who Infinite actually is. Infinite then offers to show Shadow what his worth is now, and creates an ocean of phantom copy Shadows, which they then get prepared to fight. Back at the hideout and looking at the files, Amy asks Tails if he's able to determine the location of the Chaos Emeralds. He admits that he successfully decrypted the files that contain their geographical location, but something's wrong. He can only find data for 4 of the 7 emeralds. Vector groans that that's only half of the emeralds. Blaze, now back at the hideout with Cream and Cheese, argues that knowing where 4 of them are is better than having none at all. Amy agrees, and so assigns groups to visit these zones to recover the Chaos Emeralds from the clutches of the Eggman Empire. Team Chaotix will survey the rooftops in the city of Spagonia. Silver will join up with Blaze and Cream and go to the valley in the kingdom of Soliana. As for Knuckles and Tails, they'll take the Rookie and go to Angel Island. Knuckles thinks this is strange. The last time he was on the island, he was sure there was no emerald there. But that's what the data indicated, so that's where they were headed. Meanwhile, a new level starts up, one indicated purely by question marks. Upon starting, we see that Sonic is just waking up, surrounded by nothingness, in a world unlike any we've seen before. The level doesn't last long, but just enough for him to start running and ponder where he is. The last thing he remembers is that masked creep opening up some sort of portal when he was in his cell. Back to Team Dark, we see them tearing through the army of phantom shadows outside Eggman's mystic jungle base. Rouge asks Shadow what they should do now, to which Omega interrupts and says that they should head into Metropolis. Shadow annoyedly replies that that's a terrible idea and that they should head back to the Resistance base. Omega responds in the negative, saying that they've been put under enemy radar now. Going back to the base would put the Resistance in danger. Shadow says that they don't have a choice and that the rest would be able to assist in a fight. Omega answers that Metropolis should be their next destination, to which Shadow replies by stating that it would be foolish to walk into the Doctor's City of Operations. Omega simply requests that Shadow trust him. After a bit of silence, Shadow agrees, and the three rush off to United Federation Zone by way of their first team level, Act 1, Station Square. Rouge is the first to ask Omega why he was insistent that they make their way to Metropolis specifically. Omega reveals that he managed to record the Chaos Emerald location data and decrypt it. The safest bet was to travel to the emerald closest to them, which was located in Metropolis, and report to the Resistance afterward. Shadow informs them that the communications with HQ are still cut, so their only option is to press onward. Soliana Kingdom Zone opens up with Silver Squad running through Act 1, Kingdom Valley. They all talk about how glad they seem to be working together on this operation. At the end of their level, they meet a young lady who seems to be hiding deep within the kingdom walls. She announces herself as the Princess of Soliana, Princess Elise III, and how it's nice to meet them all. Obviously, since we're revisiting an area from 06, I think it's important to note that none of the characters really remember each other or the events of that game, so this is sort of a redemption thing for Elise too. The squad is taken aback by this revelation, especially considering how dangerous it is for her to stay in a city that's now controlled by Eggman. She says that in the face of danger, she felt the need to stay and fight for her people. Cream commends her for her bravery, and the two form a bond of sorts. Blaze asks Silver what their next move should be. While unsure, he dares to ask Elise a strange question. If her kingdom is at a war with the Eggman Empire, does that mean that Eggman has a base somewhere nearby? Elise responds by saying that while she hasn't seen it herself, she has it under good authority that Eggman has a base deep in White Acropolis, past the Dusty Desert. When asked if she could get them to the desert, she speaks with determination, telling them that she'll do what she can. Team Chaotix make their way through Spagonia, but interestingly, their stages aren't denoted by any kind of zone. Instead, the location they're currently in works as the zone, and the level name as the act, which in this case is Rooftop Run. Rooftop Ruin! Yo! While everything seems to be in a state of ruin, I even said it there, wow, they remark on how simple their task seems to be overall. By the end of their stage, their commander chimes in to ask if they've found the emerald yet. Vector replies that they haven't, but Amy's voice seems to have caught the attention of someone. The Chaotix are approached by Professor Pickle, who remarks on how long it's been since he's last seen Amy. He invites the Chaotix into what remains of his lab. They hook up the Resistance's communicator to Pickle's computer, where they can speak more freely. Amy has an idea. Would it be possible for Professor Pickle to have texts that contain any information on a gemstone called the Phantom Ruby? While he is unsure, he'll make sure to check. Charmy becomes impatient and asks that they all finish looking for the emerald, to which Vector and Espio agree and bid farewell to the professor. Just outside his lab, they spot the emerald but are met with yet another unfamiliar face to them, but a familiar one to us, Zavok the Zeti. He jumps in, taking on the entirety of the Chaotix on his own, taunting them. But again, it's in a way that doesn't quite seem right, at least to us as the audience. He manages to steal the Chaos Emerald right out from under them. Wasting no time, they give chase to this new threat. Aboard the Tornado, Team Sonic make their way to Angel Island Zone, starting off on the beach now created by the island's fall. Knuckles, infuriated, comments on how Eggman will pay for what he's done to the island, industrializing it. The advantage here is that with all this new machinery, the Avatar can better assist with their grappling hook. Tails asks Amy if they have the exact location of the emerald, to which she replies by saying that based on the data they have, it seems to be sitting right at the Master Emerald Shrine. This confuses Knuckles even more. He knows he didn't have one when he was last on the island. Near the end of the level, the team sees Metal Sonic racing alongside them, alerting them to his presence. Back to Sonic, this time we don't actually play through any sort of level, we just see him come to a stop in this strange place. He's beginning to lose faith, uncharacteristic of him. He just doesn't see a way out. He's been running for some time now, to no avail. We see Eggman in his lab, where Orbot informs him that it would seem that the Resistance is on the move. Looking at the monitor, he notices 4 sets of 3 colored dots. He asks about one set in particular. Who are they? Cubot answers in a comical fashion, describing the one that looks like a darker Sonic, the pretty Batgirl, and their older brother. This infuriates the Doctor, who thought that Infinite had dealt with them. As he emerges from behind Eggman, he chastises Infinite for his worthless attempt to stop them. This lights a spark in Infinite, who vows to finish them off once and for all. Back to Team Dark, we now have United Federation Zone Act 2, Central City, combining elements from City Escape and the level of the same name in Shadow's own game. This is, after all, where Gun HQ is located, and Rouge comments on how it might be in their best interest to swing by their old workplace to see if they can get back in touch with the Resistance. Omega agrees, while pointing out that there's a strong chance that there was nothing left of Gun after the rise of the Eggman Empire. Shadow is intrigued by the idea, especially since he'd like to know why Gun wasn't much help during the invasion of Eggman's army. At the end of their level, we see them enter the ruins of the old Gun headquarters. Sitting at his usual desk is a brooding, unkempt figure, one that these characters know all too well. He looks up and in a panic points his gun straight at them. But that's when he realizes. He's looking at Agents Rouge, Shadow, and Omega, almost surprised to see them alive. Team Dark is surprised to see him, too. Their old commander. Shadow asks how things managed to get so out of hand. The commander explains it was due to the Eggman army. They were outnumbered, but worst of all, outclassed by a secret weapon. Infinite. The way he created hordes of enemies, distorted reality. There was nothing Gun could do. Worst of all, Infinite created illusions of Eggman's army to look like armed units and fellow soldiers. It became difficult to know who was friend or foe. Rouge asks if he knows anything about the Phantom Ruby, and the commander gasps. He knows all too well about the Phantom Ruby. When the attack on Central City happened, they had their researchers investigate what it was that could possibly give Infinite the power he had. And they found something. Or at least something similar. Shadow then thinks out loud, remarking on how this power isn't Infinite's own, meaning he could theoretically lose it. Omega quickly suggests that they should try to get back in touch with the rest of the Resistance. Silver Squad have made their way into Soliana Kingdom Zone Act 2, Dusty Desert. A rather standard level, there isn't much in the way of new information, except for one detail from Amy, who says that she hasn't had contact with Team Dark in some time. This comes into play at the end of the level when the squad encounter a phantom copy of Shadow, which sends them, Amy included, into a frenzy, thinking that he's betrayed the Resistance. Upon finishing the level, the group confronts the Phantom Shadow on the nature of his treason. Shadow then says that he can't allow them to get to the Doctor's base. The group respond by saying that after they take down the base, they'll take the Chaos Emerald Eggman has there too. Even the Phantom copy seems confused. A Chaos Emerald at the base? If that's the case, then their little group is to go no further, and a boss fight with the Phantom copy of Shadow takes place. Upon defeat, the copy dissolves and disappears. While everyone is confused, Amy contacts them to tell them that there's no time to dwell on that and to proceed to White Acropolis. Back to Team Chaotix, they're led to the city of Chunan, where their location is the remains of Dragon Road. Following Zavok the entire time, the team comes to the realization that they won't be able to catch him, and instead will have to find a way to trap him. So instead of reaching a certain goal point, their goal is to find fireworks scattered throughout the level and fire them off at Zavok. Once taken down, the Chaotix manage to catch up to the Zeti for a fair fight this time. A boss fight ensues with him, this time with the knight version of Chunnan. During the fight, Zavok exclaims that he's grateful to have had them lead him to the Chaos Emerald, but that their usefulness had reached an end. This is where Vector realizes that they never had the emeralds in the first place. Eggman simply had their location. The Chaotix prevail in their fight against the Zeti, who much like Shadow disappears after his fight. Espio gets in contact with Amy to inform her of their success in securing the Chaos Emerald, and asks if they should return to base. To their surprise, Amy tells them not to, and that they should take advantage of their position to proceed to Eggman Land, one of Eggman's bases of operations, and take it down from the inside. Charmy assesses that that's a dangerous mission, but a theme park might be fun. Vector says that they've been given orders and to follow them, so they proceed. Team Sonic now find themselves on Act 2 of Angel Island Zone, Mushroom Hill, where again, the rookie's grappling can come in handy given all the vines that have managed to stick out amongst all the metal that has been placed over the area. Knuckles again remarks that Mushroom Hill was one of his favorite places to be on the island, while Tails tries to assure him that they'll take back the island and restore it to its former glory. Something rather frightening happens here, however. Amidst all the returning egg robos, some of them are augmented by the power of the Phantom Ruby and become Death Egg robots which try attacking the group. They remark that even taking one of them down is a hassle, let alone an entire fleet of them. From afar, they manage to see Metal Sonic still rocketing through the sky in between the ocean of Death Egg robots. Knuckles notices that he's headed to the Hidden Palace and that they have to hurry. We're back with Sonic, who now only walks along the nothingness, wondering how long it's been since he's been in here. Wondering if his friends are okay. Desperately, he clings onto the hope that they're fighting as hard as they always have, and that hopefully he'll get to see them again soon. Team Dark's third United Federation Zone act, Metropolis, starts here, with Shadow successfully communicating back with Amy. Amy is surprised to hear from them again, especially Shadow, who she thought had betrayed them and fought Silver Squad. They explain that it was a copy created by the Phantom Ruby. When asked where they are, Omega replies that their location is at the heart of Dr. Eggman's base of operations, Metropolis. Amy is shocked and worried for their safety, but ascertains that they must have gone ahead and secured a route to get to the Chaos Emerald. Rouge answers that this is correct, but that there's something else she should know. When browsing the files back at Gun HQ, aside from learning what they could about the Phantom Ruby, they also discovered something that Gun didn't have the time to communicate to an outside source. Eggman had created another Death Egg, and that even if they were to defeat him, the Death Egg would allow him the resources to simply rise again. Amy answers that that's wonderful news, to which Shadow is bewildered and asks if she heard them correctly. Amy answers that she did, and that perhaps it's best that they just disband the resistance and allow Eggman to reign. Omega correctly asserts that this does not follow the pattern of Amy's regular speech. Amy responds by saying that perhaps Omega should have just stayed destroyed back in the Mystic Jungle. He was worth more that way. Rouge is outraged, but Shadow can see through Amy's words. It's not Amy. Infinite's here. A boss battle against Infinite takes place at the heart of Metropolis, as he constantly changes reality. In the end, Team Dark comes out on top. Infinite is far from retreating, however. In that moment, Rouge spots the Chaos Emerald and dives for it, and Infinite follows suit. Shadow intercepts Infinite, allowing Rouge the ability to secure the Emerald, and Shadow to use his Chaos Control to flee the scene, causing Infinite to scream in a fit of rage. The team teleports into Metropolis' core, with Omega preparing to destroy the entire facility. And it happens. They bring down Eggman's first and primary base of operations, allowing for the United Federation to be reclaimed. Silver Squad reaches White Acropolis, Soliana Kingdom Zone's third act. Amy updates the team as to what's happened. The United Federations have been reclaimed, as well as the first Chaos Emerald. Blaze is surprised to hear this, since no one was assigned to that location. Amy reveals that the victory comes at the hands of Team Dark, which Silver shows a surprise for. Cream naturally asks how the rest of their friends are doing. Amy replies that while she knows that Team Sonic is en route to Hidden Palace to reclaim Angel Island, she lost communication with Team Chaotix some time ago and is worried about them. Blaze laments this, but assures them that they must focus on the task at hand. Amy agrees and asks for a status report, which Silver gives. They're infiltrating the Eggman base in White Acropolis. Cream remarks on how cold the area is. Amy commends them for their hard work and gives the order to destroy the base and secure the Emerald. Amy chimes in again to tell them that she has readings for an Eggman mech, one that resembles the Egg Genesis guarding the proper entrance to the base. Now it's a fight to destroy it, ending the level. While Cream and Cheese search for the Emerald, Blaze starts burning the place up and Silver crushes machinery with his psychic powers. The base is successfully destroyed, but the Chaos Emerald is nowhere to be found. Upon exiting the facility, they are met with Princess Elise, who had followed their endeavors the entire way, something they note was dangerous. She thanks them for their efforts, claiming that they might now be able to combat Eggman's army once more. As a token of her appreciation for reclaiming her kingdom, she wants to offer a gift. A blue Chaos Emerald, which she hopes will serve as a good luck charm. They receive it and thank her for her assistance. They could not have done this without her. Team Chaotix reaches Eggman Land, but something is curious about it. Familiar, even. One thing I always thought was a missed opportunity in the original game, but that I very much appreciated, was that Espio name-drops Seaside Hill from Sonic Heroes, the first area from the game where the Chaotix made their return after only being featured in Knuckles' Chaotix. The place where you rescue Espio in Generations. This place just seems so tied to these characters, and I couldn't for the life of me think of a way to include it in their story when I focus on a theme for them. I knew that Eggman Land would make sense, especially after 2 other Unleashed theme stages, but what if Eggman Land wasn't just a theme park this time? What if it was a water park? Staring at Eggman Land, Espio recognizes that the park is built on the remains of what used to be Seaside Hill. Charmy exclaims how rotten Eggman is for doing something like this, while Vector makes sure to know that he'll pay for this transgression. During the level proper, Espio tries to contact Amy to inform her that they've infiltrated Eggman Land, but he gets no response, which they all think is odd. Charmy asks what they should do if they have no orders. Vector reminds Charmy that they were given orders, to take down the theme park from the inside. Now they just have to find where that is. Partway through the level, Amy is able to establish a connection again and asks what their status is. Vector replies that they've infiltrated Eggman Land, per her command. Amy, astounded, remarked that she'd made no such order, that she lost communication with them during their fight with Zavok. Espio puts it together, and Vector exclaims that this was all a trap. Charmy explains that they have the Chaos Emerald and asks if they should just return to base. Amy tells them that they're in too deep and might as well finish this mission. She tells them that Eggman Land should have a computer room inside that, if destroyed, could seize all operations. Vector tells his team that it's time for them to find the computer room, but before they're able to, Amy chimes in once more to tell them that she has another reading, that another of Eggman's mechs is approaching at high speeds. It's revealed to be another model of the Egg Dragoon, one that is unmanned. And by unmanned, I don't mean that no one is piloting it, I simply mean that Eggman isn't the one doing so. For some strange reason, Orbot and Cubot were given the task of dealing with the Eggman Land intruders. And see, I know this sounds incredibly stupid, but let me explain. We all know that Orbot and Cubot do nothing more than service comic relief, and I know that this seems incredibly out of place in terms of the theme, but what about the Chaotix has ever had a theme? Their first appearance in the series was in a side game for an add-on to the Genesis that didn't even feature Sonic as a playable character, the only Sonic-related game to even release on that add-on. Their second appearance was in a weird game where you could control 3 characters at the same time, where their objectives were different from the rest of the teams. They're hardly ever consistent with whose team they belong to. Espio was partnered up with Silver and Rivals 2 for whatever reason. In Free Riders, Vector's part of Team Rose, and then joins up with Blaze and Silver and Team Sonic Racing. You rescue Vector from Rooftop Run Zone in Generations, even though the Chaotix weren't present in Unleashed at all, and that's why I gave them Zavok as the phantom copy they face. Not only would Zavok not fit in any other level motif, he's so out of place as one of the main villains that fighting Team Chaotix is kind of the only thing that makes sense. I considered giving them Metal Sonic since he's the final boss of both Knuckles' Chaotix and Heroes, coincidentally the first 2 games they appear in, but Zavok being part of Team Sonic's path just felt off. Like, he and Knuckles never interacted in Lost World, and his interactions with Tails were so limited that it hardly made an impression anyway. Metal Sonic is the only one of the Phantom copies that is a classic character, one that's been around since the 90s, so it made more sense to me to have him be with Team Sonic, where the out-of-place Zavok fought the out-of-place Team Chaotix in the out-of-place Sonic Unleashed stages, culminating in a fight against the out-of-place Orbot and Cubot, piloting the weirdly appropriate Egg Dragoon. And you know what all these elements strangely have in common, though? Aside from the Sonic Unleashed stages, they keep bringing the aforementioned elements back for some reason, even though they're so weird. Not to mention, you would fight Zavok in Dragon Road, whereas you fought him in Sky Road in Lost World, which has music that kind of sounds like Dragon Road's music, where he uses a robot called the Mech Dragon in Lost World, followed by the Egg Dragoon in this rewrite. Another reason I thought it would be appropriate to have Eggman's henchman pilot the Egg Dragoon is because SA-55, the prototype for who would eventually become Orbot, makes his only appearance in Unleashed. And SA-55 is supposed to be leet speak for the word sass, which just makes me think of the Zeddy Zaz, just saying. And when you think about it, Orbot and Cubot being a boss of Eggman Land, which is a theme park, also fits because Orbot and Cubot's first appearance was in a theme park in Sonic Colors. I also think it's kind of cool because the Egg Dragoon is pretty similar to the Egg Emperor, at least in terms of how you fight it in Heroes and Generations. Anyway, all this to say that Orbot and Cubot get defeated, the Chaotix find the computer room, and shut down Eggman Land. We get a scene where Infinite returns to Dr. Eggman, where he immediately reprimands him for having left his post, failing to detain their enemies. This is where they decide to unleash the newest Death Egg robot, and Infinite mentions that the machine wouldn't be able to function at full capacity without the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Eggman snaps back by saying he's well aware of the situation, but calmly reminds his underling that there's little to worry about, since even if they were somehow able to take the emerald in Eggman's possession, it's impossible for the Resistance to obtain all the emeralds anyway. However, he does have a plan that would work just as well. Team Sonic, meanwhile, dash into Angel Island Zone Act 3, Hidden Palace, which starts off in the Lava Reef section, turning into the Palace version halfway through. Amy contacts them, asking for a status report. Tails responds to inform her of their current location. When prompted on how the rookie is doing, Knuckles says that they're holding their own pretty well. Amy compliments them by saying that they had good partners for the mission. The only other thing that's mentioned during the course of this level is how little it seemed like Eggman's army had changed the palace, seemingly the one place they didn't industrialize. At the end of their level, it's a simple fight against Metal Sonic in front of the Supersonic mural. After Metal's swift defeat, he disappears, after which Tails is the one to question why they bothered making a phantom copy of a literal machine. Approaching the shrine, the group finds 2 gemstones. Knuckles picks up the Chaos Emerald, still confused as to why it was just sitting there in the Hidden Palace. Further along, however, the Avatar picks up a strange striped magenta gem. Tails asks what it is they have there, and the Avatar holds it up, which Tails notes looks vaguely familiar. Knuckles says that it's finally time to take back his island, where the whole thing had started, and places the Master Emerald atop the shrine. Thinking they'd won, they briefly celebrate before being met with something terrible. Everything starts shaking and the shrine starts rising. Confused, they wonder aloud what could be the cause of this. And slowly, it's revealed that the Master Emerald Shrine had been adapted to suit the chest plate of a brand new Death Egg robot, one that Eggman pilots from the top as he laughs, revealing himself from the cockpit. Infinite reveals himself as well and commends the Doctor on his foresight to use the Chaos Emerald location as a means to take the Master Emerald. Tails expresses his confusion, not understanding why it was that they would just hand a Chaos Emerald over to them. Not wasting a chance to gloat, Eggman explains that with the powers of the Master Emerald and the Phantom Ruby, the Chaos Emeralds are little more than paperweights, but they'll discover that soon enough. Eggman orders Infinite to send them on a one-way trip to Null Space. When asked about Null Space, Infinite reveals that it was something born out of his will, combined with the power of the Phantom Ruby, something that even the great Dr. Eggman hadn't been able to create, the comment being much to Eggman's annoyance. As Infinite sends out the void towards Tails, Knuckles, and their newly obtained emerald, the Avatar shoots a grappling hook and kicks them out of the way, getting sent to Null Space themselves as Tails shouts after them. Knuckles picks Tails up and tells him that they need to evacuate quickly. This is a fight he knows they can't win. He just lost his island again. But this time, the Master Emerald along with it. We fade in to reveal that Sonic has stopped moving forward. He sits, reality finally settling in that perhaps he's never going to escape this place. And that's when it happens. Someone else is sent here. That kid that Sonic saved just before all this happened. Sonic recognizes them and realizes that if they were sent here, that means that people must still be fighting the good fight back home. The Avatar nods in agreement, but Sonic is still downtrodden. After all, there's still no way for them to escape this place. The Avatar thinks for a bit and uses the stone he found at the Hidden Palace to create a path, more reminiscent of the environment design that Null Space has in the actual game. Sonic regains hope. He sees a path. Where it leads, who's to say, but they won't know until they try getting there. We play an actual version of Null Space this time, with Sonic and the Avatar teaming up. During the level, Sonic reveals that Eggman had him locked up in a cell the entire time after the incident in Sunset Heights. He was forced to watch as the world was taken over, cities destroyed, people taken from their homes, and at the end of it all, that masked jerk who by then he knew went by the name Infinite showed up again to send him to this place. As we finish the level, we're able to see something in the distance. A very faint light. And as Sonic and the Avatar run toward it, they realize what it is. A Chaos Emerald. Sonic reasons that Eggman and Infinite must have hidden it away here to avoid anyone being able to collect all 7. With it now in his possession, Sonic knows what he's able to do. He chaos controls them back into their own world, where they appear in the cell where Sonic had been imprisoned. Only now, neither of them had constraints to hold them back and they make their escape. A scene takes place where Tails and Knuckles, now in the tornado on the way back, contact Amy and ask to route the communications with the rest of the Resistance. They inform everyone, still at the locations they were assigned to, that Dr. Eggman has built a new Death Egg robot. They obtained the Chaos Emerald at Angel Island, but lost the Master Emerald and the new recruit. In shock, everyone remains silent. Shadow is the one to break the silence, asking his commander what their next move should be. At a loss for words, Amy stammers, but orders everyone to return to the hideout as quickly and safely as they can. Everyone confirms, and that's when we pull out to see that Amy has a Chaos Emerald of her own. After that, we go into the next act, Death Egg Zone, which is when Sonic realizes where he was being held, but he also notices the Space Colony Ark, which is probably his best bet to get back on planet. The level plays out as normal, only with assistance from the Avatar. After that, the entire Resistance is reunited at HQ, and Amy calls on the different leaders of each team to give a status report on their missions. They each detail what their experiences were, very briefly, all summarizing that a Chaos Emerald was collected. Amy recounts that after Sonic's defeat, she collected a Chaos Emerald of her own among the wreckage at Sunset Heights. Silver notices that they were still short 2 Chaos Emeralds, to which Amy replies that there's no time to look for the missing ones. She calls upon Tails to be the tactician that they need in order to come up with a plan to defeat the Empire with what they have. Tails starts freaking out, at a loss of what to do, when he focuses on Shadow. He tells everyone that the Ark is their answer. They may not have all the Chaos Emeralds, but they have enough of them to try to blast the Death Egg to bits. Team Dark tells them that they now have access to Arsenal Pyramid, an Eggman base that they would now control through Metropolis. Blaze inquires what they would do in the event of having to face the massive Death Egg robot powered by the Master Emerald. Amy orders them to retreat. With the group expressing their confusion, Amy reminds them of what Team Sonic had been told. Even assuming that they had all the Chaos Emeralds, the power of the Master Emerald renders them null, not to mention they still have to deal with the Phantom. The group gets a call. Upon answering, they're met with the sight of Professor Pickle, whom Tails is happy to see. The professor says that he looked through his text at Amy's request and may have found something pertaining to what she described. A rare stone called Valtron is able to be used to augment reality, create distortions, and even illusions. Valtron, for those unaware, is what the Phantom Ruby was called in the early scripts of Sonic Forces, back when it was still called Sonic Wars. Rouge recognizes the stone as the Phantom Ruby, but Tails recognizes it as the gem that the Avatar picked up back at Angel Island. Tails is quick to ask if there's anything that they can do to counteract the Valtron. The professor is unclear, but says that its power binds to whomever uses it first, rendering it useless to anyone else. It is also considered a soft stone, meaning that it's easy to break for whatever that's worth. Tails answers that that information is worth plenty. The next level, Arsenal Pyramid, can be played with any set of characters the player chooses, the only level with this distinction. The banter during this level is less plot important, more so characters reflecting on their journey and hoping their current endeavor works as planned. Back to Sonic and the Avatar, they now have to venture through the debris surrounding the space colony in a final Rush-esque zone called Forgotten Colony. Halfway through, Sonic surprisingly notices a spaceship coming up toward the Ark, telling his buddy that it looks like their friends are right on schedule. As our level finishes, the Resistance reconvenes on the space colony in the same familiar hall where the ending of Adventure 2 took place. Knuckles remarks on how he's glad that they're all there in one piece. Amy responds by saying that she's just happy that he wasn't the pilot this time around, a cute little reference. As they all settle in, the shutter opens, causing everyone to turn, and in walks the Avatar to everyone's surprise and excitement. When asked how they escaped null space, they hear the voice of someone they haven't heard in a long time.
Nothing can contain the two of us at max power, not even null space!
In a dramatic entrance, everyone looks over at the door to see Sonic standing there, Chaos Emerald in hand. The room falls silent. This is an emotional moment for a lot of them. Their friend, the one they were all sure was dead, is still alive. Sonic looks around awkwardly, asking if everyone's okay. Everyone celebrates Sonic's return as they all go to embrace him, minus a few of his friends here and there. But smiles appear on all their faces, and even a few tears on some. Sonic congratulates everyone on their own success, particularly Amy's as the commander, who has let out the first sigh of relief she has in months. Sonic asks what the plan is, and Tails tells them that they need to get to the Eclipse Cannon to destroy the Death Egg. Sonic notes it as a rather extreme plan, but Knuckles is quick to tell him that Eggman has a new Death Egg robot. Sonic writes it off as no problem, since surely they wouldn't have come here without the rest of the Chaos Emeralds. He'll just use their power and take it down the way he always has. Knuckles chimes in again, telling him that they have the Master Emerald, which makes Sonic take the situation way more seriously. Amy adds that it wouldn't matter anyway since they're still missing one. Shadow speaks up to say that the amount of emeralds they have is more than enough to destroy the Death Egg, which should be the main priority at the moment. A new level, Final Assault, begins, reminiscent of Cannon's core. We have each of the teams taking care of new challenges to get to the Eclipse Cannon. This is where we can have the Avatar shine in their own way, taking advantage of the use of their Wispin and Grappling Hook to allow Team Sonic, now composed of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, to make way to the cannon's chamber. During their section, Sonic realizes that even after the Death Egg is blown up, they might have to deal with Infinite. Did they ever find a way to stop him? Tails summarizes what the professor had told them about the Phantom Ruby and how fragile it is. They don't need to separate the two. They just need to make sure to find an opening and crush it when they can. After this level is complete, Team Sonic walks up to the cannon, confident that their plan has succeeded, when they notice the remaining emerald is already in place in the cannon. They had it. They had the last emerald. And worst of all, they know the resistance is here. Eggman emerges from the shadows, as does Infinite. They note Sonic, asking how it was possible for him to have returned. Sonic responds, telling him that they shouldn't have locked him in with the key. Infinite decries it as an unfortunate mistake, but not one that they will make again. Knuckles threatens them, telling them that once the emeralds are in the cannon, the Empire is finished. Eggman tells them to go ahead and place the emeralds where they may. Tails stops Sonic from doing so by asking why. That's when Eggman drops the bombshell that in doing so, he has complete control of where the cannon is aimed, and if they go ahead with their plan, their entire planet is doomed, willing to sacrifice the planet he's taken over in favor of seeing his enemies destroy their home. In essence, calling their bluff. Everyone over the radio tells Sonic not to do it. He's torn. To not do it is to admit defeat and effectively turn whatever the Eggman Empire didn't have over to them. To do it, however, dooms their entire planet. They're at a stalemate. But someone shows up to the party, grappling their way in, removing Eggman's emerald from the cannon. Eggman, taken aback, orders Infinite to send them all to null space, now! Infinite retaliates by saying that they'll get sucked in too. Eggman insists that he do it, and a portal is opened. Quickly, the Avatar reacts and manages to grapple out of the room, with the Doctor holding onto their ankle and escaping with them. Team Sonic awakes in null space, Sonic joking that he sure did miss this place. Knuckles jokes that at least he has company now. Tails giggles and agrees, saying that being with them almost makes him forget that they're surrounded by absolute nothingness. Infuriated, Infinite tells him to stop talking. Sonic rolls his eyes and teases that maybe he wouldn't be so angry if he had some friends too. Infinite angrily retorts that friendship is meaningless. Before this war started, those who once called themselves his friends abandoned him in his time of need, and he rose to power without them. And now, because of their own friends, Team Sonic will meet their end here. And once he's exterminated these pests, he'll return to their world and annihilate the rest of the Resistance. A boss fight commences in null space, where Infinite creates illusions that Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles can navigate. As they run together, the illusions take the form of various locations from their past, and while the set pieces change, the platforms they run on retain their shape. Their goal now is to get the Phantom Ruby from Infinite and put an end to the copies and illusions. This essentially borrows heavily from the final boss from the actual game, without being the actual final boss. Upon defeating him together, Sonic knocks off Infinite's mask. Tails uses his tails to swipe away Infinite's hands from protecting the Phantom Ruby, and Knuckles delivers the final blow, punching it so that it shatters. Null space starts collapsing, and we finally see Zero's face again, looking up at the heroes. He exclaims that this was impossible, that he had defeated them all. He had the power of the Phantom Ruby. What did they have that he didn't? Sonic merely smirks, and in a corny but ever so charming way, he simply says, each other. Tails agrees and asks Infinite what he now has without the Phantom Ruby. On his knees, Infinite's eyes grow wide. I have nothing. Knuckles lets out a single chuckle and teases that with the Phantom Ruby, he was able to create literal nothing. And without it, that's just what he is. Softly and with a half smile, Infinite replies, worthless to the very end, and fades away, just as the rest of his Phantom copies did. Amy gets in touch with Team Sonic, begging them to respond. They answer, and she breathes a sigh of relief, thinking for a minute that she had lost Sonic again. Tails points out that they should take advantage of this opportunity to place the emeralds in the cannon and destroy the Death Egg, as he types away, changing the direction of the shot. Sonic nods, and we get a shot of the Eclipse cannon shooting straight at the Death Egg, as the rest of the Resistance cheer on from the main hall. Amy can't believe it. The war is over. They can finally start rebuilding the world they once knew. And that's when they hear it. The sound that they had grown to fear, which instilled panic in their hearts. The sound of the Phantom Ruby being activated. They see the explosion reverse and the Death Egg reform, as if nothing had happened to it. Then they see it multiply. Dozens of Death Eggs and hundreds of Eggman fleets soaring through space. Silver claims it impossible, as Cream and Cheese tremble behind Blaze. Omega speaks. His sensors indicate that the battle is not won. Sonic hears this through the communicator and asks how that's possible, that they destroyed the Phantom Ruby. That's when they hear Eggman's voice through the speakers in the Ark. They didn't really think that he would have given the original Phantom Ruby to Infinite, did they? He kept the source for himself, and that's when we see it. Eggman's new doomsday machine, dubbed the Death Egg Phantom, with the Master Emerald as its power source. Except, it looks different. Racing back to the main hall, Team Sonic finally see it for themselves, and Knuckles is the one to notice. The Master Emerald is now a magenta hue with stripes on it. Eggman laughs as he explains that as the Phantom Ruby's power allows for any possibility to become reality, he created the possibility for the power of the Ruby to be amplified by the Master Emerald, creating the Phantom Emerald. All hope seeming lost, Vector asks what they should do. Shadow suggests that they use the Chaos Emeralds to fight it. Silver answers that it's no use. With the Phantom Ruby being powered by the Master Emerald, any Chaos energy would be cancelled out. Tails thinks for a moment, and sees the Avatar from across the room. He gets an idea. The final boss battle begins, fusing a level with a boss. We start out with Team Chaotix aboard one of Eggman's fleets. As Vector remarks how crazy this is, Charmy agrees, and SVO assures them that for this plan to work, they'll need to cooperate. Amy chimes in to explain the plan. The Avatar is in possession of a Voltron, the gem they all know as the Phantom Ruby. The idea is to use the Chaos Emeralds in two ways. For one, they'll allow Supers Sonic, Shadow, and Silver to use their power to bash into the Death Egg Phantom and shatter the Phantom Emerald, but it's obvious that Eggman wouldn't just let them do that. That's why they need to create an opening by transporting the emeralds to the Avatar, who will use the emeralds to amplify their own ruby to cancel out the effects of the Phantom Emerald. The Chaotix move first, making their way onto a platform where the Avatar then takes over, creating the first opening. Silver takes the emeralds, entering his super form. It's a straight shot to the Death Egg Phantom. Eggman is powerless and so starts panicking. He may not be able to use the power of augmented reality, but even without that power, his machine still functions, and so the Supers have to dodge lasers, rockets, and even meteors, all while collecting rings to survive. Upon taking a hit, Eggman regains use of the Phantom Emerald, where he once again creates a myriad of illusions, mixing up his fleet and canceling out Silver's super form. Cream catches Silver from falling, and now it's time for the Silver Squad to deliver the emeralds to the Avatar. This time, Shadow is the one to go super, to the same effect. Once again, Eggman cancels out his super form, mixes up the formation of his fleet, and it's time for Team Dark to carry the emeralds. One last time, the Avatar cancels out Eggman's Phantom Emerald to allow Sonic to deliver the final blow to the chess piece holding it in.
No! This isn't over yet! I won't let you take my planet!
Eggman yells as he uses his emerald one last time, switching control over to the Avatar, joined by Tails and Knuckles, who run through Eggman's fleet and, met with no feasible way to get to the Death Egg Phantom, uses their ruby, powered by the Chaos Emeralds, not to cancel out Eggman's own power, but to create a path for his team. Racing through and avoiding Eggman's illusions, they manage to reach him and shatter the Phantom Emerald, eliminating the mech's power source in the process. The Death Egg Phantom doesn't blow up, but all of his illusions fade, the same way Infinite and his Phantom copies did. Eggman laments, quietly realizing that he lost. He had it all, and he still lost. Everyone cheers, and we see the people from every zone we played through cheer their heroes on for their victory. Amy falls to her knees, tears in her eyes. They can finally go home. They can finally rest easy. They finally won. Members of each team are seen congratulating each other. Rouge apologizes to Knuckles over what he had to do to the Master Emerald. Knuckles sighs, but admits that it's fine. It wouldn't be the first time he's had to put that thing back together. Sonic praises the Avatar once again for their bravery, stating that all this wouldn't have been possible without their help. So, what's next for them? The Avatar turns to look at the planet. Sonic interprets their gaze. Right. They need to get back and start rebuilding everything that Eggman had destroyed. It might take a while, but it'll all be worth it in the end. Sonic tells his buddy that they need to get back home as the credits start rolling. After the credits, we're back on Angel Island where this all began. Knuckles places the put back together Master Emerald in its rightful place, and we see the island float back up into the sky. No dialogue, just an image letting the audience know that this is a sign that everything is returning to normal and everything will be okay. God, that ended up taking a lot longer than I meant it to. I got really carried away in some sections, and I realized there are certain aspects that could be more detailed. There were certain things that I couldn't touch on just because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to, and there's a wild imbalance when it comes to certain character interactions. I still think it'd be cool if there was more overlap between characters you don't get to see interact much in the games, but I tried to keep it as Well, I want to use the word realistic, but I acknowledge that my script does get fanfiction-y and fanservice-y at times. I guess more so what I mean is that I tried to rewrite this in a way that takes elements from previous games that it makes sense to borrow from, in a way that doesn't overstep its boundaries in terms of characterizations or overall moments. Things that Sonic Team should be able to do if they weren't fucking around. I wanted to preserve the sense of war while also elevating the effort it takes from all parties, not just Sonic. At first, I was worried I wouldn't be able to give the avatar the importance necessary to justify a custom character, but I think I made it work. The one thing I really wish I could have found a way to do is make Infinite and the Avatar have a deeper relationship to each other, given that they're both new characters. But establishing his backstory through Shadow, as well as his nature as the main villain to Sonic, makes it difficult to single out for the Avatar. I also couldn't think of a way of incorporating the chemical plant the way I wanted to. It's a great place of operations for Eggman, but it would have been out of place for every team involved. Oh, and Big. I wish I'd been able to put Big in there somewhere. Maybe he has cameos in every level, why not? Anyway, what did you guys think? What elements from the original game would you change? Do you think my rewrite is reasonable, or is it maybe asking for a little too much? Let me know in the comments, and let me know what other Sonic game you think would be worth rewriting. Until next time, stay safe and stay awesome.